Welcome to the Success Factors TED Talk entitled Producing Structural Schedules with RAM and Revit Interoperability. My name is Wentao Zhang. I'm Product Manager here at Bentley, looking after interoperability with particular emphasis on the workflows between our structural model and our modeling applications, and even to our third-party partners, if you will, and in this case, with Revit. So right off the bat, let's see what we'll do and what we'll see. Okay, so we're going to start off with a building model, which we're going to analyze and design in RAM structural systems. Okay, here's a screenshot of that. We're going to bring this model in to the Revit modeling environment. Not only will we get the concrete beams, column walls, slabs, and foundations, you will also get reinforcing. And in this case, the particular area of interest are the foundation reinforcing. I'm certainly no expert in Revit, but what I'll try and do is produce a schedule and foundation plan like this. Different way to present the foundation schedule. So the workflow would be RAM structural system, and via ISM, or integrated structural modeling, which is Bentley's interoperability solution to link our ISM enabled applications to each other. So with Revit can play with the ISM workflow via a ISM Revit plugin. Okay. So a quick ISM primer in case those of you haven't heard about this from my previous talks. So ISM is a Bentley technology. It's a product framework or philosophy, if you will, that helps designer exchange data, synchronize revision, track progress, compare alternatives, and publish deliverables. And what we're doing here is we're taking a model from our analyses space, pass on what's common between our analyses model and the building model, in this case to Revit. So here this Venn diagram shows the idea of what ISM is suited for. ISM is suited to store the consensus amongst applications. So the point right there in the middle between these different applications that play with ISM, this Venn diagram here. Okay, first off, we need a building model in RAM structural systems. You can either do that from scratch or similarly use ISM to bring that model in from Bentley's other modeling applications or even Revit, right, via ISM. So once we have a building model in RAM structural system, we analyze and have that designed as well. We can have many aspects of the building elements designed for us. Concrete columns, beams, walls, and foundations, which is the subject of this talk. Likewise with steel beam columns and braces, we can have that sized and designed for us as well, and have the information transfer out into ISM and to a consuming ISM enabled application such as Revit. But again, for this talk, we will only focus on the foundation design, which are the dimensions of the spread footings, and the reinforcing design as well. So with RAM structural system open, let's have a quick look at what the model looks like in 3D and also in plan. We have a simple 3-story building, some spread footings assigned. With it analyzed and forces obtained, we're ready to go into RAM foundations. We want to jump into the RAM foundations module within RAM structural system. So a couple of things to note is we want to ensure our spread footing design is quote, quote, square. Okay, so there's some option to check. So the unique design for given geometry rationalizes foundation design so we don't get an extraneous combination of spread footing dimension and rebar layouts. And we need to be mindful of special cases when there are top reinforcing that's required. So we need to make note of that in the production of our schedule. And during the ISM creation process, we want to make sure that reinforcing option is turned on in RAM structural systems. So those individual rebars will go out into ISM. Okay, picking up where we left off from RAM structural systems, where our model whole building analysis has been conducted, we're going to jump into RAM foundations module. Okay, so in here I'm just clearing some previously assigned reinforcement. Under criteria, design, you can select your design code, and under the design option, we want to make sure this radial box is checked for spread footing of equal dimension, group footing design based on controlling steel. So this will discretize our design a bit better, so we don't get 20 or 50 different designs unique per column. This is what we want to avoid. Okay. Under criteria forces, you can select which module it gets its forces from. And here you can set some design criteria in terms of minimum thickness to consider, etc. We want to generate some load combinations. We can set this ourselves or get it to do for us automatically per the code. Okay. You can also generate some soil load combinations based on code as well, right? Or set these yourself if you want. Now we want to assign spread footing geometry, and within here we can get it to optimize dimensions for us, and then we can set some limits. And we can just go process, design, spread footings. So Round Foundation created a bunch of design for us. So let's freeze all the design first, and we're going to view some of them individually. Okay. We can view one particular spread footing design here. 24 number freeze for bottom reinforcing. We get a green traffic light saying design's okay. You can drill into the results by clicking view results button and view the generator report for us. You can reassign each reinforcing if you wish and have your own design, if you will. You don't have to stick with what the program spits out for you. And here, looking at this one particular spread footing, it also has top reinforcing. So we need to be mindful of that when we try to produce schedule of this in Revit. A good way to see all the design on screen is spread footing design summary. Okay, we see all of them have bottom reinforcing except for that one particular spread footing there. Okay, with top reinforcing. Okay, so once we're happy with our design, we hit save, and we're ready to go to ISM. So integrated structural modeling or structural synchronizer, as mentioned before, is it appears during our change operation and provide you with control into what and how to bring objects into your ISM consumer, which in this case is Revit. Okay, let's see that in action. So with our foundation design, now we're going to jump into File, ISM option, and ensure Export Reinforcement is turned on. Okay, that's already turned on. So now I'm going to go ISM, create ISM repository, give it a unique name. So what we're doing is we start off in RAM. We want to create this source of truth, what we call an ISM repository, which essentially is just a file that lives on your machine with the file extension .ism.dgn. Okay, so now we kicked off the ISM creation process. Some options pop up. You can mostly accept the default from the RAM side. And we should see a structural synchronizer window. So this is the first time we've seen structural synchronizer in this process. It's prompting us the objects it wants to commit to this repository and giving us a chance to accept, reject, or delete these objects. So here it is showing up. Okay, we see our building model. So, and then just jump to transparent display, reinforcing objects passed in as well. Okay. So by default, we can just accept everything. So here we're given a chance to give a commit comment. This is an opportunity for you to write something meaningful here for this commit. So in the future, if you do want to come back to this or revert back to this, you will know what's going on. Okay, all this is only possible via ISM Revit plugin, and in particular, ISM Revit plugin Connect Edition Update 3. With Connect Edition Update 3, we added a spread footing import enhancement. In previous versions, spread footings were imported as any old slab, but of course, with spread footing being a square or rectangle, we need certain dimensions and parameters. So the family we added allows for this. So you need at least Connect Edition Update 3 and check for that if you try to duplicate this workflow. Other noteworthy points are type marks versus host marks. Because of a particular quirk in structural rebar, object association, it's only associated with a host at the host level. So think of family, type, and instance. If you progress down the hierarchy of Revit objects, it's only associated at the instance level. So how do we get around that to get it to reflect the type? So we do that pretty much with a workaround using duplicate host names. Okay, and we'll see that shortly how that's done. And you want to accept the Revit warning that's telling you that you have duplicate host names. Other things to be mindful of are in the schedule productions, you want to uncheck itemize every instance. So you don't want every single instance occupying a row of your foundation schedule. You want that to be grouped some way, and a way to do that is to uncheck itemize every instance. And also use combined parameters to your advantage. So besides just showing the dimensions of our spread footing in individual columns in our tables or our schedule, we can combine these parameters into a reinforcement call out or bit of text that's easily understandable. Okay, so let's see that in action. Here I'm going to open up Revit, jump into New, Structural Template. First thing we do is to ensure the ISM Revit plugin is the correct version. So we're going to go into the Bentley tab. If ISM Revit's installed, this is where it's located. And we're going to jump into Help. Click on What's New and make sure you have Connect Edition Update 3. So this is the enhancement I was talking about. Okay. So with any ISM enabled application, you got 4 workflows in front of you. We have Create, New from Repository, Update Repository, and Update from Repository. So if you're starting from scratch, you want to pull information in. We want to do New from ISM Repository. So a new Revit file or new Revit object from an existing ISM repository, which is exactly what we're doing, which is what we have here. So we turn off opening structural synchronizer because we've already seen that in RAM, and we're turning off preview. So we select our previously created ISM repository, okay, and we hit next. But prior to doing that, let's jump into advanced and check some of the options. You want to make sure include reinforcement on import is checked for these items here. Then we're presented with some mapping dialogues. First off, we have material import mappings. These are quite straightforward. The equivalent Revit material is created for us. Next, we have some column framing section import mapping. So we can map equivalent ISM parametric section to certain Revit families. You can have these pre-filled. under settings file. So you want to ensure you got green check marks before proceeding to the next stage. So here we're doing a surface member import mapping. It's looking at the surface members in ISM, its alignment, surface, and thickness. And it's going to map it and create the equivalent Revit type. And then here we go, we proceed with the import process. Okay, we finished the import process and let's see the model that's produced. Okay. We get some warnings alerting us certain objects in alignments, etc. These are warnings, not errors, which is okay to proceed. Let's jump into 3D view to see what this looks like. So this is what we brought into Revit from RAM, as you see, including reinforcing as well. Okay. So we want to create schedule of the spread footing along with the rebar information. Okay. Now this is the special footing where there are top reinforcing we need to pay special attention to. But for the rest of them, the reinforcing are on the bottom face. Okay, so we're gonna use a trick here to quickly select all the individual instance of a certain type. So there's some default family types in there. We can just delete them first, just to make it a bit clearer. It's fine to delete them. If you do happen to delete the wrong one, Revit will warn you. So we want to cancel out of that because there are instances of that particular one in our model. Next, we want to select this type that's visible in the entire project. So with all of them selected, we want to go into its property and modify its individual mark. Okay, accept the warning. We're going to repeat this quite quickly through all the individual types. Okay, so we're selecting the type and modifying all of them, all its host marks, right, from F1 to F5. Recall that one of our footing is special. Okay, it's the same dimensions as our other footings, but different reinforcing specifically for the top layer. So we need to give that a unique mark. Next, we're going to view schedules, schedule quantities. With filter list selected to structure, we're going to drill down to structural foundations. Give it a new name, footings schedule. Hit OK. We drill into the fields we want to bring in. So remember there's mark, which is mark on an instance, and then there's type mark, which relates to the type that the instance belongs to. So you want to make sure you want to bring mark in rather than type mark. What we just modified in the previous step with the F1, F2, etc. Was the mark field. So you want to make sure you bring in the correct one. Next, we're going to bring in the dimensions with comments in case you want to manually fill in this column. So we have length and also foundation thickness. So we want some control on the objects that we want to bring into the schedule. We do that via filter, mark, and we want that to begin with F. So all our objects with mark type F1, F2, etc., all of them will be considered and be brought into the schedule. So you want to sort by mark. And here as well, you want to make sure itemize every instance is unchecked. So not every instance would appear, but they will be considered in the schedule. Okay. Play with appearance as you see fit, but here we can see the footing schedule nicely laid out in here. We've got our width, length, foundation thickness, and also comments column. You can certainly just literally type in your reinforcing in here. That's a bit manual way of doing it, and it may be prone to errors if you're redesigning. So what we will show you next is how to have a semi-automatic way of bringing even the reinforcing design as well. Okay, we're separating the reinforcing for bottom layer only compared to top layer only. So this is a special prerequisite step you have to do if you have top reinforcing. Okay, so select your top reinforcing in your Revit model. You can select them en masse or per instance basis. And in comments, let's include something recognizable we can use to filter out in our schedule. So in here, I'm just going to add the word top and hit apply. Next, I'm going to jump into our scheduling quantities. So under view, schedule quantities. And we want to do structural rebar. And again, we present it with the fields dialog. We want to bring in host mark. So host mark is the mark of the concrete object that hosts the current structural rebar. Okay, not the type mark, host mark. So similar to before, we want to filter our schedule based on mark. This case is host mark. We want to begin with F. And then also for the comments to not contain the word top. So we're doing a reinforcing schedule of the bottom bars. Okay. Similar to before, you want to uncheck itemize every instance and you get a standard looking foundation reinforcing schedule. But what we want to do is let's look at some customization we can do both to the fields and the combination of parameters into marks. Okay, so here I'm going to turn some fields off. I'm going to add in a new field called combined parameters. This allows me to combine the values in the different parameter fields into one text string. Okay, and this is our reinforcing text string. And this is quite a powerful and neat feature. You can play around with prefix, suffix, and separators. So here we have number of bars, X number of certain size bars for certain length at spacing center to center, bottom face each way. Remember because of our reinforcing design, we're forcing it to be a square, and because of some design options we checked in RAM foundations, we can afford to do this. So the number of bars in both directions are the same, for bottom face at least. So this is the schedule we have, okay? Unique for each host mark. And here we see some of the spacing measurement. We got some 1s, some 6s in there. Now we want to apply some rounding. So what we can do is we can unhide the spacing field first. With the spacing field selected, we can format the units to our liking. So here let's round to the nearest 10 millimeters. Okay, for the default, we see is rounded to nearest 0. Now we can hide these fields. Now our string reads properly. Nicely rounded numbers. Okay, so we want to, in a way, merge, either present this as two separate tables in our sheet or have that information merge. And we'll see that And we'll see that in the next little bit. Given that our footing dimension for width and length are equal, because we're forcing it to be square, upfront and round foundations, we can further distill this information to one column only. So I'm bringing width and a foundation thickness, and again I'm using combined parameters and calling it dimension. So here's suffix of sq, give it a thickness, just removing the separators, and we'll see how that presents. We're happy with the way it looks. So let's hide some of the redundant columns. So here we're making a copy of the base plan, rename it to foundations plan, and we're going to jump into the annotate tab. We're going to select tag all and make sure we have structural foundations tag selected. Additionally, you got your leader option, horizontal and vertical option, and hit apply. What we want to do is customize the way the tags look. Right now it's pointing to dimensions. So we can select one of the tags, hit edit family, and we do edit label. Within here, we don't want the type name. Remember, for each of our instance, we have its own mark, right? So we want to bring that in instead. So we select mark, and we hit OK. Now we want to load this edit family back into our project. Additionally, we can modify the size of our font in here. So I'm going to bump this up slightly. And want to override the existing version. And in here, the structural plan, we see the foundation mark. Now we want to bring this into a new blank sheet. Of course, you can do this to your company standard. So just quite quickly, I think we get the idea. We can just drag this foundation plan in. We can modify the scale that we bring it in with. Let's make that smaller. We can also, similar to how we drag the view into a current sheet, we can drag in the schedules we created. Okay, so we want to have both the footings dimension schedule and the foundations reinforcing schedule. They both of them essentially point to the same thing, but they exist as two schedules. So we want to have a workaround to make it appear as one table, as one schedule for our presentation purpose. And we do that by hiding the redundant host mark column in the reinforcing schedule and playing around with the presentation, turning titles off to make that appear so on the sheet. Remember again that for the last foundation type, there's special considerations. So you might need to add a asterisk or what have you to denote special foundation reinforcing for certain types. With that, we've completed our spread footing design and scheduling workflow. We covered a lot in this talk. We went from a footing design in RAM structural systems and RAM foundation, passed that into ISM repository, and then we cover some tips and tricks on how to manipulate tags, plans, and foundation schedules in Revit to place it on a sheet. To those of you that have yet to join, be sure also to check out BE Communities. It's our online community and forum for all our products. We have experts with eyes on it all over the world. You may find your next query to be already asked and answered on BE Communities. Okay, so with that, it concludes my talk. Thanks again for attending and have a great day.